I was standing in my kitchen with a police detective when my husband finally looked me in the eyes. Really looked at me. For the first time in probably 10 years. The community center party was in full chaos around us. Champagne glasses abandoned on tables, his family demanding explanations. Our neighbor already in handcuffs by the door. My lawyer stood beside me holding a folder thick with evidence. 33 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. With documents, with math, with the truth finally written down where nobody could deny it anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Let me tell you how a 58-year-old woman in a soft pink bathrobe, worn thin at the elbows, became someone who could stand in a room full of people and destroy 2 men with a single folder. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in spring, when the windows finally open and life starts to feel possible again. I was sitting by the phone that never rings anymore in our small cottage with peeling paint and a vegetable garden. Our retirement community with a community center and benches in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Or I thought it was ours. I had just pulled fresh cornbread cooling on the counter, the smell filling every corner of our home. The radio played something soft while I worked on my crocheting, my hands moving through patterns I'd known for 40 years. The certified letter came at 2:15. I remember because I was listening to the news and they were talking about the stock market. I signed for it at the door, my old Singer sewing machine, inherited from my mother, visible in the corner behind me. That machine had made my wedding dress, my children's baby clothes, quilts for every grandchild. It sat there like a witness to everything I'd built. The letter said my retirement payout was ready, $3.2 million. I read it 3 times. 35 years at the hospital, every shift, every holiday, every overtime hour I could possibly take. Double shifts when my back screamed, night shifts when I could barely stay awake driving home. I had worked my body into the ground for this number, for this future, for our security together. I remember sitting there with that letter in my hands, thinking about all the moments that added up to this number. The Christmas morning I worked instead of watching my youngest open presents. The night my daughter called crying about her first heartbreak, and I was too exhausted to talk for more than 5 minutes. The school plays I missed, the soccer games I couldn't attend, the family dinners where I fell asleep at the table because I'd worked 16 hours straight. Every sacrifice had a dollar amount attached to it now, $3.2 million. That's what my absence from my own life had earned. I called my husband immediately. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. David, it came. The retirement letter. It's ready. How much? His voice was strange, tight. $3.2 million. Can you believe it? Everything we worked for, it's finally... Come home right now, he interrupted. We need to celebrate together. This is our moment, sweetheart. Don't stop anywhere. Come straight home. There was something in his voice, an urgency that felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling away because I always pushed feelings away. Feelings were inconvenient. Feelings got in the way of doing what needed to be done. I believed him because I always believed him. That's what 33 years of marriage does. It builds belief like layers of paint, each year covering the cracks underneath until you can't see the foundation anymore. I grabbed my purse. I didn't even change out of my house clothes. I just drove, my heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, excitement, relief. We had made it. All those years of sacrifice, all that pain, all that exhaustion, it had all been for something. The drive home took 12 minutes. I remember every single one of them. I remember thinking about the country house with land and space to breathe we could finally afford. I remember planning the garden I would plant, tomatoes and cucumbers and herbs I could dry for winter, maybe chickens. I'd always wanted chickens. I remember imagining cooking exactly what I wanted, no one else's preferences dictating my meals anymore. Maybe I'd get that Range Rover in British racing green I'd always admired. Maybe I'd finally rest. I remember the feeling of lightness in my chest, like something heavy I'd been carrying for decades was finally being lifted, like I could breathe fully for the first time in years. I remember thinking that this was what it felt like to arrive, to finally reach the destination you'd been walking toward your entire adult life. I pulled into our driveway at 2:43. The first thing I noticed was Richard's car, our neighbor. It seemed strange that he'd be there in the middle of the afternoon, but maybe David had told him about the retirement payout. Maybe they wanted to celebrate together. Richard had been such a good friend to us over the years, always there when we needed help, always available with advice. I walked through our front door with that letter in my hand and my future in my heart, and I found my husband sitting at my kitchen table with our neighbor and a lawyer I had never met in my entire life. They had champagne open. They were celebrating. But they weren't celebrating with me. They were celebrating before I arrived. As if my presence wasn't necessary for whatever they were commemorating. The kitchen I had cleaned 10,000 times. The table where I had served 33 years of dinners. The chairs where my children had done homework and my grandchildren had colored pictures. It was all suddenly unfamiliar. Wrong, like walking into a stage set of your own life. The light was wrong. The air felt thick. Everything looked exactly the same, but felt completely different, like those dreams where you're in your house, but it's not quite your house. Sweetheart, David stood up. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile he used with telemarketers, with people he was trying to get rid of. This is Amanda. She's here to help us with some paperwork. Amanda, the lawyer. She was young, maybe 30, with a blazer that looked expensive and hands that wouldn't stop moving. She kept touching her necklace, her watch, the papers in front of her. Nervous energy radiating off her like heat. The neighbor, Richard, smiled at me. The man I had baked for. The man I had invited to every holiday dinner for 15 years. The man whose wife had died 3 years ago and who I'd brought meals to for months afterward. The man I had trusted like family. Congratulations, he said, raising his champagne glass to me. This is a big day. But he didn't offer me a glass. Nobody moved to pour me champagne. Nobody pulled out a chair. It was like I was interrupting something rather than joining a celebration in my own honor. I looked at the papers spread across my kitchen table. Even from the doorway, I could see my signature, over and over, on documents I had never seen before. My signature, my name, written in what looked like my handwriting on page after page of documents spread across my table like an accusation. What is this? My voice sounded small, distant, like it was coming from underwater. Just some transfers, David said smoothly, too smoothly, like he'd practiced this. To protect the money, tax purposes, estate planning. Amanda prepared everything. We just need you to sign a few more things, and then we can really celebrate. Tax purposes, estate planning. The words that had always made me feel stupid. The language of a world I was told I didn't need to understand. I walked closer to the table. My legs felt strange, disconnected from my body. Each step felt deliberate, like I was learning to walk all over again. The lawyer, Amanda, wouldn't look at me. She was young, maybe 30, and her hands were shaking as she organized the papers. She kept glancing at the door like she wanted to run. Her face was pale. Sweat beaded on her upper lip despite the air conditioning. I picked up the top document. It was a transfer authorization, moving my entire retirement payout into an account I had never heard of. An account with David's name and Richard's name, not mine. The words swam on the page. Account holder, transfer amount, beneficiaries. Legal terms that felt designed to confuse rather than clarify. I don't understand, I said. It's complicated, Richard jumped in. Too quickly. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Financial stuff, investment opportunities. You don't need to worry about the details. You don't need to worry about the details. How many times had I heard that in 33 years? How many times had I been told that finance was too complicated for me to understand? That I should just trust them? That my job was to earn the money and their job was to manage it? How many times had I accepted that division of labor without question? I looked at my husband, really looked at him. At 59 years old, he looked healthy, rested. His skin had color. His eyes were clear. He'd been to the gym that morning, I could tell from his clothes. He'd had time for breakfast, for coffee, for reading the paper in peace. Meanwhile, I had chest pains I ignored. High blood pressure I medicated instead of treating. A small stroke 2 years ago that I worked through because he said we needed the money. My hands shook sometimes now. My vision went blurry when I was tired. My back hurt constantly, a deep ache that never quite went away. I looked 58. He looked 45. We were the same age, but my body had done the aging for both of us. "These signatures," I said slowly, pointing at the documents. "When did I sign these?" "Last month," David said. "Don't you remember? When we did the estate planning?" But we hadn't done estate planning last month. Last month, I had worked 72 hours because 2 nurses called out sick. Last month, I had been so exhausted I fell asleep during dinner. Last month, I had started taking more blood pressure medication because the numbers kept climbing. I tried to remember signing anything. Tried to remember estate planning meetings or financial discussions. But everything from last month was a blur of hospital hallways and patient charts and exhaustion so profound I sometimes forgot what day it was. "I don't remember that," I said. "Well, you did," Richard said. His voice was sharper now, impatient. "We all sat right here at this table. You signed everything. We just need to finalize a few more things." I looked at Amanda. She was crying. Silently, tears just running down her face while she stared at those papers. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. She looked like she might be sick. Something was very wrong. Something was happening that I didn't understand but could feel in my bones. That instinct that women learn to ignore. That voice that says danger, but we've been trained to call it paranoia. "I need to use the bathroom," I said. I walked down the hallway of my own home, feeling like a stranger. My worn Bible on the nightstand, open to Psalms, sat exactly where I'd left it that morning. I had been reading about deliverance, about God seeing the oppressed, about justice coming even when you've given up hoping for it. The timing felt significant, divine even. That this morning, of all mornings, I had read those specific words. I locked the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the tub. My soft pink bathrobe, worn thin at the elbows, hung on the back of the door, and I realized I'd been wearing the same robe for 8 years because I never bought anything for myself. Every dollar went into our future, our retirement, our security together, except it wasn't ours. It never had been. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly terribly clear. Like a fog had lifted, and I could see shapes I'd been walking around for years without recognizing. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call my children. They lived 3 states away, and what could they do? I didn't call my sister. She had her own problems, her own husband who controlled her money, her time, her life. I called Betty from the community center. She answered on the second ring. "Betty," I whispered, "I need help. I need help right now." "Where are you?" "Home. But something's wrong. Something's very wrong and I don't know what to do." "What happened?" Her voice was sharp now, alert. "David and Richard are here with a lawyer. They want me to sign papers I've never seen. Papers that have my signature, but I don't remember signing them. Papers that move all my retirement money into accounts with their names, but not mine." Silence on the other end. Then, "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm coming right now." "Betty, I don't—" "Listen to me," she interrupted. "Whatever they're telling you, whatever explanation they have, don't believe it. Don't sign. I'm 5 minutes away." I hung up. I splashed water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman looking back. 58 years old, Gray hair I'd stopped coloring 2 years ago because who had time? Lines around my eyes from 35 years of night shifts. Hands rough from work and crocheting and cooking and cleaning and giving and giving and giving. When had I become so small? When had I started disappearing? When had I stopped being a person and become just a function? A paycheck with legs? A machine for generating income that other people spent? I thought about my mother. She died at 63. Worked herself to death cleaning other people's houses. Never owned anything, never rested, never said no. I'd watched her disappear one cleaning job at a time until there was nothing left but exhaustion and apology. I'd promised myself I wouldn't become her. But standing in that bathroom, looking at my face, I realized I'd become exactly her, just with better pay. I walked back to the kitchen. They were still sitting there waiting. The champagne was getting warm. Their faces had changed, though. David looked annoyed. Richard looked impatient. Amanda looked terrified. "I'd like to read everything before I sign," I said. David's face changed. Just slightly. Just enough. "Sweetheart, we've been over this." "I'd like to read it," I repeated. My voice was steady, calm. But something had shifted. Some fundamental change in how I was standing, how I was breathing, how I was taking up space in my own kitchen. Richard cleared his throat. "We have a time-sensitive investment opportunity. If we don't move by end of business today, then we'll miss it," I said. "I'd still like to read everything." "For God's sake," Richard snapped. "We've been planning this for months. Everything is ready. We just need you to—" He stopped, caught himself. But it was too late. I'd heard it. "We've been planning this for months. Not we've been planning for your retirement. Not we've been planning to help you. We've been planning this." That's when Amanda started sobbing. Not quiet tears anymore. Real gasping sobs that shook her whole body. "I can't do this," she choked out. "I can't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." David stood up fast, his chair scraping against the floor. "Amanda, we discussed—" "I don't care what we discussed." She was standing now, papers clutched in her shaking hands. "Look at her. Look at her face. She just worked 35 years for this money and you're going to steal it right in front of her and pretend it's legal." The room went completely silent. "Nobody's stealing anything," Richard said, but his voice was dangerous now. This wasn't the friendly neighbor anymore. This was someone else, someone I'd never seen before. "This is legitimate estate planning." "It's fraud," Amanda screamed. "It's forgery and fraud and elder abuse, and I won't do it. I won't be part of this." And then she told me everything. She told me about the forged signatures, how they'd traced my handwriting from old documents, how they'd practiced until they could replicate it perfectly, the fake contracts, the investment accounts opened in my name that I'd never seen, the documents moving my pension into accounts I couldn't access. She told me her father, Richard, had planned this for 5 years, that he'd befriended us specifically because he'd found out about my nursing career, my retirement timeline, my payout amount. That every holiday dinner, every neighborly conversation, every moment of friendship had been calculation, research, planning. She told me my husband had been involved from the beginning, that Richard had approached him 10 years ago with the plan, that David had agreed immediately, eagerly, that they'd been siphoning money from our accounts for years, testing whether I'd notice, seeing how much they could take before I questioned anything. She told me they had been waiting for this day, for the final payout, for the moment when everything I'd earned would be in one place so they could take it all at once. She told me I was supposed to sign the papers today, that by tomorrow the money would be transferred to offshore accounts, gone, untraceable. And they'd already prepared documents showing that I'd agreed to everything, that I'd signed off on every transfer, that I'd had full knowledge of all the accounts. She told me she was supposed to have me sign the transfer papers and then tell me it was done, That by the time I understood what happened, the money would be gone and there would be nothing I could do about it. That I'd be left with nothing. Just the house, which they'd already planned to force me to sell to cover debts. "But I can't," she sobbed. "I can't look at your face and do this. My mom died last year, cancer, and she looked just like you, tired, trusting. She worked her whole life and had nothing at the end. And I keep thinking about someone doing this to her and I can't. I just can't." The room was completely silent, except for her crying. David and Richard weren't celebrating anymore. David's face had gone gray. Richard looked like he was calculating, figuring out his next move, whether to deny everything or run or threaten or negotiate. I sat down slowly in one of my kitchen chairs, the same chairs where I'd fed my children breakfast before school, where I'd helped with homework, where I'd hosted Christmas dinners and birthday parties and Sunday lunches, where I'd served my husband every meal for 33 years. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The world was tilting. Everything I thought was solid was liquid. Everything I thought was real was performance. "How much?" I asked. My voice was steady, calm, but I didn't recognize it. "How much have you already taken?" Amanda pulled out her laptop with shaking hands. She showed me accounts, transactions, years of transfers, my overtime pay rerouted, my bonuses redirected, investment accounts in my name that I'd never opened, now emptied. Money I thought was going toward our mortgage, actually going into their pockets. She showed me the documents, my signature, perfectly forged, on account after account. Transfers that happened while I was working night shifts, too exhausted to check bank statements. Withdrawals timed to coincide with my longest stretches at the hospital, when I wouldn't notice money missing. She showed me their planning documents, spreadsheets tracking my work schedule, notes about when I was most tired, most vulnerable, most likely to sign things without reading, calculations about how much they could take without triggering alerts. She showed me everything. Conservative estimate? They'd already taken $400,000 over 10 years, and they'd been planning to take all $3.2 million today. I did the math right there at my kitchen table. Every double shift I'd worked, every holiday I'd missed with my grandchildren, every chest pain I'd ignored, every doctor's appointment I'd skipped, the small stroke I'd pushed through, the high blood pressure, the exhaustion, the way my body had started breaking down at 55, 56, 57. I had sacrificed my health for money that was already gone, for security that never existed, for a future that was being stolen in real time while I worked myself to death to earn it. I looked at my husband, the man I'd married at 25, the man I'd built a life with, 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 33 years. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the table, at his hands anywhere but my face. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Now wait just a minute." Richard started, standing up. "Get out of my house." "You're hysterical," Richard said. "You're confused. Amanda is having some kind of breakdown. None of this is—" I said, "Get out." David finally looked at me. "Sweetheart, let's talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding." 33 years, I said. 33 years I gave you. Every dollar I made, every hour I worked. I gave my health, my time, my body. And you were stealing from me, planning to leave me with nothing. That's not— Get out of my house or I'm calling the police right now. That's when Betty arrived. She didn't knock. She just walked in with 2 women from our church and her son Marcus, who was a paralegal. She took one look at the scene, at my face, at the papers spread across the table, at Amanda crying, at the champagne and the laptop full of evidence, and she understood everything. "Everyone who doesn't live here needs to leave," Betty said. Her voice was iron. "Now," David stood up. "This is my house." "Is your name on the deed?" Marcus asked. He was already on his phone, recording everything. Silence. "That's what I thought," Marcus said. "Leave, now, before we call the police." Richard grabbed for the papers, but Marcus was faster. He stood between Richard and the table, his phone recording, his body blocking access. "Those are private documents," Richard started. "Those are evidence of fraud," Marcus said. "Touch them, and I'll have you arrested for tampering with evidence." They left. Richard grabbed his jacket, but Amanda stayed. David tried to take the champagne bottle, and Betty physically removed it from his hand. "Leave," she said. "Now." I watched my husband walk out of our house, the house I'd paid for with my nursing salary, the house we'd raised our children in, the house I'd cleaned and maintained and filled with food and life for 33 years. He didn't look back. Amanda sat at my kitchen table and cried while Marcus took photos of everything with his phone. While Betty made me tea, I couldn't drink. While the church women sat with me in silence because, what do you even say? I couldn't move. I just sat there doing math in my head over and over. 33 years of marriage, 35 years of nursing, every dollar I ever made, gone into our joint accounts. His business failures I covered, his mother's medical bills I paid, the house renovation he wanted, the car he needed, the investment opportunities that never came through. I had given everything and received promises, just promises. The church women started gathering evidence. They photographed every document. They made lists of every account Amanda showed them. They wrote down everything she said, getting dates and details and names. They treated it like a crime scene. Because it was. Betty stayed with me that night, and the next night, and the night after that. Her church member friends brought food I couldn't eat, casseroles and soups and bread that piled up in my refrigerator. They sat with me while I tried to remember how to breathe. They helped me understand that 58 wasn't too old, that I wasn't powerless, that resignation wasn't wisdom. It was exactly what they counted on. Marcus helped me create a timeline, every forged signature, every fake contract, every bank transfer, every lie. 30 years of financial manipulation on paper. Amanda, racked with guilt, gave us copies of everything. Every document she'd prepared, every account number, every email between her father and my husband, every detail of their plan. I wrote it all down. Dates, amounts, transactions, conversations. Every time David told me I was too old to understand finance, every time Richard patted my hand and said not to worry, every time I'd questioned something and been made to feel stupid for asking, written record, documents with dates and details. That became my weapon. The evidence was overwhelming. 10 years of systematic theft, forged signatures on dozens of documents, fake accounts, money laundering. They'd even filed false tax returns in my name to cover their tracks. Marcus helped me understand the legal terms: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, conspiracy. Each crime carried years in prison. Together, they could put both men away for decades. 2 weeks later, they sent me an invitation. A party at the community center to announce their retirement, funded by my money, though of course the invitation didn't say that. It was supposed to be a celebration of David's successful career, of their friendship, of their future plans. They were going to celebrate stealing my life's work in front of everyone we knew. I RSVP'd yes. I spent those 2 weeks preparing. Marcus connected me with a lawyer who specialized in elder financial abuse. Catherine Park. She was in her 40s, sharp as a blade, and she'd handled dozens of cases like mine. "This is one of the most egregious examples I've ever seen," she told me in our first meeting. "The premeditation, the length of time, the amount stolen. This isn't opportunity theft. This is organized crime. We filed police reports, got court orders freezing all their accounts, contacted the retirement fund administrators and had the payout held pending investigation, built an airtight case. Catherine walked me through every step, what to expect in court, how they'd try to defend themselves, the arguments they'd make, the ways they'd try to discredit me. "They'll say you're confused," she warned, "that you signed everything willingly, that you're old and don't remember, that this is a misunderstanding between a husband and wife." "But I have Amanda's testimony," I said. They'll say she's unstable, that she made it all up, that she's lying to get back at her father for something. You need to be prepared for them to attack every part of your credibility. I spent those 2 weeks getting ready, not just legally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I read through my Bible every night, the Psalms about justice, about God defending the widow and the oppressed, about evil being brought into the light, about truth prevailing. I talked to my children, explained what their father had done, watched their faces as they tried to process that the man who'd raised them was capable of this. My oldest daughter cried for 2 days. My son threatened to drive down and confront David himself. My youngest just went silent. "Did he ever love us?" she asked. "If he could do this to you, did any of it mean anything?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. I also prepared practically. I got my hair done for the first time in 3 years. I bought a new dress. Not expensive, but nice, powerful. I wanted to look strong, put together, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Betty helped me practice. We role-played the confrontation. What I'd say, how I'd stand, how to keep my voice steady when I wanted to scream. "You're going to want to cry," she said. "Don't. Not there. Not in front of them. You can cry here, with me. But there, you need to be stone." And I got ready for their moment. The day of the party, I woke up at 5 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with my coffee and my Bible, and I prayed. Not for revenge, not for their destruction. I prayed for strength, for truth, for justice. I prayed for the courage to do what needed to be done. The community center was decorated with balloons and streamers when I arrived at 7:30. Blue and gold, David's favorite colors. Our friends were there. Our neighbors, David's family, people I'd known for decades. They all thought they were coming to celebrate, to congratulate, to share in the joy of retirement. They had no idea what they were actually walking into. I wore my new dress, navy blue. Simple. I did my hair. I even put on makeup. I wanted to look strong, powerful, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I arrived at 7:30. The party didn't start until 8, but I wanted to see the room first, to feel it, to prepare. David and Richard were there early too, setting up. They saw me walk in and their faces changed. Confusion, then concern, then something like fear. "What are you doing here?" David asked. "I was invited," I said calmly. "You weren't supposed to—" Richard started, then stopped. "Wasn't supposed to what?" I asked. "Come to a party in your honor? A party celebrating your retirement, funded by money you stole from me?" David tried to take my arm. "Let's talk outside." I pulled away. "We can talk right here, in front of everyone, like you planned to celebrate in front of everyone." That's when Detective Sarah Morrison walked in with my lawyer, Catherine Park. They didn't announce themselves. They just walked in like regular guests. People started arriving at 8, friends hugging David and Richard, congratulating them, asking about their plans. Where would they travel? What would they do with all their free time? Every word felt like a knife. This was supposed to be my celebration, my retirement, my moment after 35 years of sacrifice, and they'd stolen it, along with everything else. At 8:30, David stepped up to the microphone. He was going to give a speech, talk about friendship and hard work and the future, paint himself as a success story. I walked to the front of the room. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I just walked, steady and calm, with Detective Morrison and Catherine Park on either side of me. The room went quiet. People turned to look. Confusion rippled through the crowd. I handed David the folder. "I know everything," I said. Just those 3 words. I know everything. The room went silent. David opened the folder. I watched his face change as he flipped through the pages. Bank statements, transfer records, forged signatures, Amanda's written confession, police reports, court orders, everything. His hands started shaking. The papers slipped and scattered across the floor. People in the front row could see them, could read the words fraud and forgery and stolen. "This is a misunderstanding," he started. "You forged my signature," I said clearly, loudly, so everyone could hear. "You created fake accounts in my name. You stole $400,000 of my money over 10 years, and you were planning to steal $3.2 million more today." Someone in the crowd gasped. David's sister started crying. Richard tried to leave, but Detective Morrison was blocking the door. "You made me believe I was losing my mind," I continued. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady, strong, every word measured and clear. "When I noticed irregularities, you told me I was confused, too old to understand, that I should just trust you. You made me ignore chest pains and work through a stroke because you said we needed the money that was already in your pockets." David was still trying to talk, still trying to explain, still trying to manipulate the room the way he'd manipulated me for 33 years. But this time, I had proof, written documentation, bank records, forensic evidence, Amanda's testimony. I didn't let him finish. "Detective Morrison is here to arrest you both for fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy. My lawyer has filed for divorce and obtained restraining orders. The court has frozen all accounts associated with either of you. Every single asset, every single dollar." That's when they were arrested, right there in the community center, in front of everyone. David demanding his lawyer, Richard shouting about mistakes and misunderstandings, his family trying to intervene. David's sister tried to approach me. "You're destroying him over money? After 33 years of marriage?" I looked at her. "He destroyed me long before today. I'm just making it visible." They were handcuffed, read their rights, walked out past a crowd of people who'd come to celebrate with them. The room erupted, people shouting, David's family crying, friends demanding to know what was happening, neighbors taking out phones to record everything. Catherine Park stepped up to the microphone. "If anyone here has given money to David Martinez or Richard Thompson for investment purposes in the last 10 years, please contact my office. You may be victims of the same fraud scheme." 5 people came forward that night. 5 other people they'd stolen from. Smaller amounts, but same pattern, same promises, same lies. The next 6 months were brutal. Court dates, depositions, David's family accusing me of destroying their son over a misunderstanding. Friends choosing sides, people I'd known for decades suddenly avoiding me at the grocery store. Some people believed me immediately, the women mostly, the ones who'd experienced their own versions of financial control, who'd been told they didn't understand money, who'd worked while their husbands managed the finances. But others, especially the men David had been friends with, they couldn't believe it. "David? No way. He's such a good guy. There must be some explanation." They wanted the explanation to be me, that I was vindictive, gold-digging, taking advantage of a good man. Some people whispered that I'd had an affair, that this was revenge, that I was making it all up, but I had written it all down, every detail, every date, every crime, and the law was finally on my side. The trial took 3 months. Catherine Park was brilliant. She laid out the evidence piece by piece. The forged signatures analyzed by handwriting experts. The account statements showing systematic theft. The emails between David and Richard planning everything. Amanda testified. She sat on the stand for 6 hours, walking through every document she'd prepared, every conversation she'd witnessed, every detail of their plan. She cried through most of it, but she didn't stop. She told the truth even though it meant implicating her own father. Even though his lawyers tried to destroy her credibility. Even though her family disowned her. David's defense was exactly what Catherine had predicted. That I'd signed everything willingly. That I just didn't remember. That I was old and confused. That this was a dispute between a husband and wife, not a crime. His lawyer asked me on the stand, "Isn't it true that you worked long hours and were often exhausted?" "Yes," I said. "And isn't it possible that in your exhausted state you signed documents you don't remember signing?" "No," I said. Because I never saw these documents. I never attended these meetings. These signatures are forgeries. But you can't prove that, can you? You can't prove you didn't sign them and simply forgot. Catherine stood up. Your Honor, we have testimony from 3 handwriting experts stating that these signatures were forged. We have testimony from Amanda Thompson describing the forgery process. We have bank surveillance footage showing David Martinez depositing checks from these accounts without Mrs. Martinez present. The defense is asking this woman to prove a negative while ignoring overwhelming evidence of fraud. The judge agreed. The court ruled in my favor. Complete restitution, divorce, full custody of all marital assets. David got 5 years for elder abuse and fraud. Richard got 7 because he was the architect. Their assets were seized and liquidated to repay what they'd stolen. I got my $3.2 million, plus the $400,000 they'd already taken, plus the house, plus David's pension that I'd funded with my nursing overtime for 20 years, plus damages for emotional distress. The day the verdict came in, I sat in that courtroom and felt nothing, no relief, no joy, just exhaustion, like I'd been holding my breath for 6 months and finally could exhale. Betty hugged me outside the courthouse. You did it, she said. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like survival. And then I got out. I bought a country house with land and space to breathe 2 hours outside Philadelphia. Nothing fancy, just a farmhouse with good bones and a big kitchen and windows that let in light. Land where I could plant a garden. Space where I could finally rest. The farmhouse was built in 1920. It needed work, but it was solid, real. The opposite of everything my marriage had been. I spent the first month just cleaning it, scrubbing away someone else's life to make room for mine, painting walls, refinishing floors, choosing colors I liked, no one else's opinion, no one else's preferences, just mine. My liberation started small, cooking exactly what I wanted, no one else's preferences. I made fish 3 times that first week. David had always hated fish. I had gone 33 years rarely eating it because he didn't like the smell. Now I cook fish whenever I want. Salmon with lemon, trout with herbs, bass grilled with garlic. It's such a small thing, such a stupid, tiny thing to feel powerful about. But it matters. Every meal I make for myself, just because I want it, it matters. I planted that garden I dreamed about. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, herbs. I got chickens, 4 hens that give me eggs every morning. I named them after church women who helped me. Betty, Sarah, Catherine, Amanda. Every morning I collect eggs and I think about Amanda, how her courage gave me mine, how she lost her family to tell the truth. I send her updates, pictures of the chicken that bears her name. She says it helps. I started teaching workshops for seniors about financial abuse, how to recognize the signs, how to protect yourself, how to document everything, how to fight back. The statistics I learned were staggering. In Mexico, studies indicate that 1 in 3 seniors suffers some form of mistreatment. Global studies estimate that 142 million seniors suffer abuse worldwide. 142 million people, most of them women, most of them told they're too old to understand. Too confused to be trusted with their own money. I speak at community centers now, at churches, at senior living facilities. I tell my story over and over because every time I tell it, someone in the audience comes up to me afterward and whispers that it's happening to them too, that they thought they were alone, that they thought they were crazy. You're not crazy. You're being stolen from. There's a difference. Last month, a woman came up to me after a workshop. She was 72. Her son had been managing her finances for 15 years. She'd noticed irregularities, but he told her she was developing dementia, that she couldn't be trusted with money anymore. She showed me her bank statements. He'd taken over $300,000, her entire life savings. We filed charges the next day. She got every penny back, and she got her power back. That's what I do now. I help people get their power back. I'm writing a book about all of this, about how intergenerational trauma works, about how when my grandchildren watched their grandfather steal from their grandmother, it taught them that women's work has no value, that aging means powerlessness. That trust is foolish. That marriage is a trap. I won't let that be their inheritance. I won't let them grow up thinking this is normal, that this is what love looks like, that this is what family does. My daughter asked me last month if I regret the 33 years, if I wish I'd left sooner, if I'm angry about the time I lost. I told her the truth. I'm not angry about the time. I'm angry about what I was taught to accept during that time. I was taught that being a good wife meant being quiet, that being a good woman meant sacrificing, that being a good person meant trusting even when trust was being weaponized against me. I was taught that resignation was wisdom, that questioning was disrespect, that asking to see the accounts was paranoid, that wanting to understand our finances was insulting to my husband. I was taught wrong, and now I'm unteaching it, for my daughters, for my granddaughters, for every woman who sits in workshops and whispers that she thinks something might be wrong with her marriage, her money, her life. Something is wrong. Trust that instinct. Write it down. Document everything. Don't resign yourself to powerlessness because someone told you you're too old, too tired, too confused to fight back. I did all those things at 58. You can too. I'm 60 now. I wake up in my farmhouse every morning and make myself breakfast, usually fish. I sit on my porch with my coffee and my worn Bible, open to Psalms, and I read about deliverance, about justice, about how long it can take, but how surely it comes. My old Singer sewing machine inherited from my mother sits in my new sewing room. I'm making a quilt. Not for anyone else, just for me. Every piece of fabric is something I chose. Every color is something I love. Every stitch is mine. The quilt is chaotic, no pattern. Just pieces of fabric that make me happy sewn together however I want. It's the opposite of every quilt I've ever made. Those were precise, planned, perfect. This one is just for joy. I thought about getting that Range Rover in British Racing Green. I went to the dealership and everything, sat in it, felt the leather, imagined driving it. But you know what I bought instead? A used truck, something practical. Something I can use to haul lumber and garden supplies and donations to the community center. Something that serves me instead of announcing status to people I don't care about impressing. The truck is 15 years old and runs perfectly. It has scratches and dents and character. It's real, useful, mine. David sends letters from prison sometimes. His lawyer delivered papers asking me to visit him, to consider reconciliation after he serves his time, to remember the good years. I shred every letter unopened. I don't need his apology. I don't need his explanation. I don't need closure from the man who stole my health and my money and 33 years of my life. I have something better than closure. I have freedom. Betty comes to visit every other weekend. She brings her grandkids and they run around my property while we drink tea on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. She saved my life that day she walked into my kitchen. She didn't question, didn't judge, just showed up and stayed. That's what real love looks like. Not champagne celebrations over stolen money. Not promises of futures funded by fraud. Not 33 years of being told I'm too old to understand. Real love shows up, believes you, helps you stand, stays while you figure out how to walk again. Amanda visits sometimes too. She's in therapy now, working through the guilt of what her father made her part of, working through the loss of her family, who chose his lies over her truth. I told her she was the one who saved me. If she hadn't broken down, if she hadn't told the truth, I might have signed those papers. I might have lost everything. Her courage gave me mine. She's thinking about law school now, wants to specialize in elder law, in protecting people like me from people like her father. I can't undo what I almost did, she told me last time she visited, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure it doesn't happen to other people. That's redemption. That's what it looks like to turn guilt into purpose. I teach my workshops now at the same community center where I confronted David. The space has been reclaimed, transformed. It's not the site of my humiliation anymore. It's where I help other people find their power. The community center director asked me if it was hard to go back there, to teach in the same room where I was arrested my husband. I told her no. That space doesn't belong to that memory anymore. I filled it with new ones, better ones, moments of truth and empowerment and women finding their voices. Last month, a woman in her 60s came up to me after a workshop. Her hands were shaking. She told me her son had been managing her finances for 8 years, that she'd started noticing problems, but he told her she was getting confused, that she thought maybe she had dementia. I gave her Marcus's number. I gave her the documentation templates. I told her she wasn't confused. She was being stolen from. Last week she called to tell me she'd filed charges, that her son had taken nearly $200,000, that she'd gotten it back, that she'd gotten her power back. She cried on the phone. I thought I was losing my mind. Everyone told me I was just getting old, but you believed me. I believed you because I know what it looks like, I told her. I know what it feels like, and I know you're not crazy. That's what I do now. I help people get their power back. My grandchildren come to visit the farm. They love the chickens. They help me in the garden. And I tell them the truth about what their grandfather did, not to turn them against him, but so they understand that what happened wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable, wasn't love. My oldest granddaughter is 16 now. She asked me last summer, "Why did you stay so long, Grandma?" I thought about how to answer that, how to explain a lifetime of conditioning in a way a 16-year-old could understand. Because I was taught that leaving was failure, I finally said. That good women stayed, that working through problems was noble, that questioning my husband was disrespectful. But I was taught wrong, and I'm teaching you different. She's watching. They're all watching. Learning what it means to have boundaries, to trust themselves, to fight back. That's the real inheritance. Not money, knowledge, power. The understanding that they never have to accept what I accepted. Where are you listening from right now? I hope you're somewhere safe. Somewhere you can hear this story and know that if something feels wrong in your finances, your marriage, your life, you're probably right. Trust that instinct. If you've been thinking about asking questions but you're afraid of seeming paranoid or insulting someone you love, ask anyway. Document everything. Write it down with dates and details, and know that 58 or 60 or 70 or 80 is not too old to fight back. It's not too late to reclaim your life. What would you have done in my position? Would you have signed those papers? Would you have confronted them? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, if you've ever felt too old or too tired or too resigned to fight for yourself, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about women who refused to stay quiet, who documented everything, who stood up in rooms full of people and said the truth out loud. We are not too old, we are not powerless, and resignation is not wisdom. It's exactly what they count on. I'm 60 years old and I'm just beginning. You can too.